Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes. Welcome once again to Legal Matters, the program that's designed to address critical, timely, sometimes contentious issues that are facing consumers and businesses today. Legal information, practical information, and straight talk, as we say, about a wide variety of topics. Once again, we have one attorney, not two. We have David Bazar with us from Audette, Bazar, Cordeiro Grasso Law Firm in East Providence.
We'll miss Jackie
Miss Jackie today. We have been focusing lately on money matters. In particular, the persistent foreclosures and the issues that have been caused by a slow economy and the very high jobless rates. We discussed the Rhode Island Homes Hardest Hit Fund, an $80 million fund that is going to be a bailout for Rhode Islanders who are in trouble. And also, beginning August 1st, the Obama administration has developed a program which extends to 12 months from 3 to 4, the amount of time that you can be delinquent before you're foreclosed upon. Aware that those kinds of things are in place because of the economy, we thought that at the same time we should address some of the other critical issues that are affecting your money matters, credit problems in particular. So we're going to talk today about credit scores and credit cards. Curiously, the survey says, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau survey says, that nearly half of the people are not aware that their credit card or their consumer scores are going to affect the lender's decision about whether or not they're going to be afforded a loan. Seems rather interesting. So, David, what do you suppose that we should tell people about the direct effect that a credit score would have on would-be borrowers and theirs?
There's a number of different effects your credit score is going to have on you economically. When you apply for a mortgage, for instance, that's one of the things the bank or the lender will look at in determining, number one, whether you're going to get the loan at all, and then again, maybe at what rate you may get the loan at, what interest rate will be used. It'll affect your ability to get credit cards, it'll affect your ability to get car loans and things of that nature.
Do you think that people are very aware that there are free credit scores that are available to them now?
Well, you see it advertised all the time, and it would be a really good idea if you're in the situation where you need to go get a loan, whether it's for a car loan or a bank loan for a house or something of that nature, to know what your credit score is going in. And there are a number of places on the web and other places that you can get your free credit report. But you have to be careful of that, because there's free credit reports and then there are free credit reports that you pay for. So they're really not quite free, and these are services that you may not need.
Even with that, there's a buyer beware. And interestingly enough, because there's such an interest in having people acquire their credit scores, that has become a very big business. And let me just see here. It is more than $1 billion in revenue among those who are selling those credit card scores. So the news that tells you your Experian or your TransUnion,
yeah.
And there's another one, there are three that are pretty well known that offer free credit reports. But the other side of it is they are also quick to turn those into, or try to turn those into, a revenue-making proposition.
And that's what you're talking about. There's a difference between knowing what your score is and then one of these services that will monitor, they say, your score for you and give you access to the reports on a regular basis, but then charge you a fee for that. And there's other companies as well that will suggest to you that they can help improve your credit scores. And you have to be a little wary of those companies sometimes too. Make sure you check them out, Better Business Bureau or some other place that you might be able to check to make sure you're dealing with people who are honest and giving you a fair value for your money.
Apparently, because there's such an issue about that right now, this credit bureau, in its quest to try to become a watchdog, as recently as July 21st, as I understand it, they are trying to monitor what the difference is, and apparently there is a difference between the credit score that I would get as a free service and what that lender actually is getting at the same time. I imagine that if it's an auto loan or it's a mortgage, there must be a very big issue when someone thinks that they're going in with a good credit score only to find out from that lender they're not.
Right, and I've been told that the bank may, for instance, look at different things on your credit report for a mortgage than they might look at for a credit card or for a car loan. And if the bank is looking at something different than you're looking at, that is a bit of a problem, because you have the right to know what the bank is looking at, and you have the right to address if there's some inconsistencies or issues on there that are not correct or that you have an explanation for.
I think one of the things that had come up, people who are looking at their credit card scores or looking at their credit card bills that are going to be affecting their credit card scores, if you find that on your credit card bill there's an error, it's an honest error perhaps, or perhaps a bill was charged to you that you didn't really order, you want to dispute that. How do you know what happens to your credit during that time when you've disputed that bill?
Yeah, it's interesting because you think that you're just making a good faith effort to correct something that you shouldn't have to pay for, and it then gets reported on your credit card as perhaps delinquent. It's not being paid even though it's in dispute. It should be reported as in dispute. And then what we don't know is exactly how the banks or the other lending institutions are going to look at the dispute itself. There are a number of factors that go into your credit score. Credit cards that are open, the use of the credit cards, whether you've been delinquent in any of these payments. And there are certain techniques you can use to help improve your credit score. But there's always been an issue, and I'm not even clear on it myself, as to a dispute of a charge and how that's going to affect the score, if it affects it at all.
And depending on when you got that credit score and when that prospective lender got the credit score, they could be looking at very different issues at that given snapshot in time.
Certain things can change daily, and a credit report or credit score is just a snapshot as to what is the credit, what are the accounts that you have, what are the payments on those on that particular time. And something that might have gotten paid but didn't get reported for another week or two might not show on the day the bank got it when it does show on the day you got it.
Now, assuming you're not the credit card or the credit counselor here, but if you know that you've had some problems with credit over the years, maybe you had lost a job, you acquired a job, and you're not really sure whether that credit score is accurate, and you then now know that that lender might have something different. What would you say to a client if he was going to go in and maybe wanted a substantial loan, maybe even a mortgage? What would you suggest that he do in addressing that lender?
Well, again, there are certain services, some of them are actually very honest and upright and good companies that can help you in addressing some of these things. There are some attorneys who actually probably have some experience in dealing with credit and credit reports. Jackie, for instance, doing bankruptcies, has to deal with credit reports all the time. So if there's something that's incorrect, you can certainly deal with that. If it's just because of the situation you've been in, the score is otherwise accurate, then you need to take some time to build your score back up before you go in to try to get that loan.
Would you suggest that if, say, someone were in the middle of, I don't know, divorce proceedings, and they wanted to start credit on their own, and they needed a loan, that they should be proactive in talking to that lender and say to them, look, I'm not sure what my credit score says, but you should be aware of, and then give them a litany of background or whatever. Would that help?
Absolutely. And you know, if you're dealing with a local credit union or a small bank in Rhode Island as opposed to a national bank that may have certain regulations that they follow, and they don't look at the loan as a person but the loan as a business transaction, you may not get much sympathy. But absolutely, the personal touch always helps. You go into that local office, the credit union office, and you explain, here's the situation, this is what I just went through. Can you work with me? And many times they'll be able to work with you, especially if you can show them a history that until this one little hitch in the road came up, you were doing fine. And now you've addressed that and you're able to move forward.
It's a good thought. And this question that I have for you that's about credit, it's actually about privacy. So if we're to assume that credit scores determine not just the interest rate that you're likely to be charged on your loan or your credit card, but also it's going to affect maybe even your insurance or whether or not you can charge your utilities or build up an account with a utility company. There's some research that now indicates that almost 60% of employers use credit reports as a screening process for their applicants. Is that legal, David?
Yeah, as a potential employee, many times when you go in to sign up for a job and do the application and all of that, they'll ask for certain things. There are some things that they're entitled to look at as a matter of right. There are other things that they need your permission to look for. For example, they can do a background check on you, or a criminal background check, and they don't need your permission necessarily to go and do that. If they wanted to get other records, certain records require you to give permission to do that. I would suggest that they probably would need your authorization with the privacy rights to run a really full-fledged credit and background check.
Does it seem that that should be one of the criteria that they get to use to determine whether or not you'd be a good employee? I mean, if you were bankrupt several times, or even once, that doesn't really say anything about the person's ability to work. Maybe it's an attribute that they don't like, that maybe they're not credit worthy, but is that that's legitimate, David? It's a concern if it is.
It depends on the job. Certain jobs, there actually may be a very valid reason for wanting to know about that. If you're going to be in a position of trust with a lot of money, for example, maybe a bank teller, and you've had credit problems and history of having money problems, that might be of concern, a legitimate concern to that potential employer. Certain other jobs, it probably is of no concern and shouldn't be on their radar anyway. So I guess in Rhode Island, what we have to start with is we're sort of an employment at will state anyway. So just as they can fire somebody without having any cause, other than for one of the biases or prejudice things that you're not allowed to discriminate against for, but just we decide one day we don't need you, we can let you go. They don't have to hire you unless they're not hiring you as a result of some discrimination. Then I would suggest that they can make some of the rules as to what they want to look at within reason.
What would you advise someone who's going in for that job interview if they already know that there's probably a check mark or a black mark somewhere on what might otherwise be a fairly decent credit score or credit report? Do you think that you should be divulging such information prophylactically so that someone doesn't come back and say, oh no, by the way, David, you missed 17 payments or whatever? Should you say something?
You should have an answer to that up front.
An answer to, or?
An answer to that issue. Okay. And whether or not you have to give that answer depends on the type of job you're applying for, and you should know going in whether or not that's going to be an issue for the company that you're applying to. For example, somebody who has a criminal record and they know the company's going to do a criminal background check should disclose that up front and say, look, I had this little issue, this is what it was 15 years ago, blah, blah, blah. Let them know if it's still on your record. Same thing with a credit issue.
It certainly seems that in the next few months we have something to be aware of. Apparently, because of this new bureau, they're going to be monitoring or policing what banks and credit unions have as scores and comparing it with what those Experians or TransUnions have been reporting as scores to the consumer. The thought being that if there's some great discrepancy between the two, they're going to want to call that into question, number one, and I guess make consumers more aware of it, number two. What's a consumer to do? Does that mean I'm supposed to be checking? Well, you only get a free report once a year.
Right.
What am I supposed to be doing in the meantime? Checking and paying more for it to see how it's changed in 3 months?
I would also suggest it depends on whether or not your credit situation requires it. For example, if you already have a mortgage, you're paying your mortgage, you have all the credit cards you need, you're going along pretty well, I don't think that you're in a position where you would have to constantly check and monitor it. But if you know you're about to do something that may require